Today, I want to go over the second type of budgeting behavior and the kind of implications of that, a little deeper dive into it. So, last time we talked about the budget averse and why specifically that type of behavior can be detrimental to financial success. Now, let's go into box checker type behavior. Now, the box checkers, I kind of see them as living on the financial equivalent of a hamster's wheel. What do I mean by that? They're doing just enough to kind of get by, but not enough to be great. They're not doing enough of the stuff that they really need to do to truly push themselves to financial success, but they're not doing so poorly financially that they're setting off alarm bells in their head. So they're just kind of living in this middle ground of good, but not great. Okay? Jim Collins has a quote, which I'll read just so I get it right. He says, "Good is the enemy of great. Few people attain great lives in large part because it is just so easy to settle for a good life." Okay? This is normal in the US. This is where a lot of people are. But box checkers tend to have significant amounts of mortgage debt. They tend to have significant amounts of car debt, and they tend to have significant amounts of student loan debt. But since all three of those types of debt are not really viewed as bad debt, mortgage debt and student loans are often called good debt. Nobody really calls cars good debt, but it's so normal to have a car loan that nobody views it as truly bad debt. So there's not this social pressure to get rid of those debts. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The social norm is to have those. Box checkers may or may not have credit card debt. It really is, it depends. It's very personal, but it's not uncommon for people who exhibit box checker behavior to have some balance on their credit cards. If it's not significant amounts of credit card debt, they do often still have some on there. Okay. Now, that mentality is just, it's still dangerous because they're not pushing themselves to excel financially. They're just stagnating at good enough, right? So these are people who tend to just kind of skate along doing not the bare minimum, but just above that financially. Okay. The problem is when you get to retirement age, or as often happens shortly before retirement age, and you realize you've done nothing to secure your retirement. Okay. You know, when you start doing that at 55, 60 years of age, it's hard to build up a significant retirement savings to be able to live the retirement life you want to. You've not built wealth. The time to start building wealth is in your 20s and 30s so that you have the time for that to grow. But that requires, and this is kind of the catch, again, for these box checkers, you still have to get your spending in check. Okay. Often box checkers are not necessarily spending more than they make, but they're spending just about every dollar that they make or close to it. They may be saving a little bit. They may be investing a little bit in their retirement, maybe meeting the company match or something like that. But they're often not going above and beyond, right? Because they're not pushing themselves to excel. They're not pushing themselves to greatness. Okay. And because of that, to engage in this budgeter behavior and really start to take control of your finances often still requires, again, a decrease in standard of living. It's only for a short time, though, and this is what I try to get across to people so much. A short-term decrease in your standard of living can lead to long-term increase in your standard of living if you'll just do it for the short period of time. So this is the box checkers. Unfortunately, many people who exhibit this behavior still will not go on to be true budgeters. And the reason is simply that. It requires you to make some sacrifices that often are uncomfortable. Short term, though, but they don't look at it like that. They don't look at it as a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain, but that's really what it is. The frustrating part from my standpoint is it's so attainable, and it can be done with relatively little pain and relatively little work. If box checkers come to realize that normal where they're living isn't that great, and great is not that much more difficult to attain, then they can make that hump. They can get over that hump into, being a budgeter and being financially successful and achieving financial greatness. But again, most of them still do not, because they're not willing to accept that short period of sacrifice for the longer period of, higher standard of living and financial success. So that's the box checker. And in the last segment, we'll go into the budgeters.